This session is on synopsis and manuscript. Synopsis is a research proposal which you write first of all to get approval for your study and you submit it to institutional review board or maybe your supervisor to get approval before you can collect data and conduct your study. There are some guidelines that you have to follow to get your synopsis approved. The number of words is 1000 on average. First of all, you have to write title and it should reflect the objectives of study. Limit of words is 50 usually. Then you have to write introduction and you should give a brief background of your topic and literature review showing the importance of study and its relevance and applicability. Then you have to write rationale showing the purpose or intentions of the study. Number of words can be 500 or it can be even more than that. After introduction, you write objectives. These are the statements that clearly inform what the researcher plans to do in research. And it must start with an action verb and it should include the name of variable under study and objectives should be SMART. Then you give your operational definition of the variable under study. And it may be required in some synopsis and not all the synopsis. You need to define your variables when their definition is not the same everywhere. For example, I may be studying awareness of plastic safety. No standard definition of awareness of plastic safety. So I need to first define what I mean by awareness of plastic safety. That is, I have to operationalize my variable. Define it in the ways that I will be using for its measurement. After that comes your hypothesis. Again, it is not required in all the synopses. It is only relevant when your study design is interventional study or cohort or case control study, and you can write it for a cross-sectional comparative study also. After that, you write your materials and methods, and that includes study design. That is whether it was a case study or a cohort or a case control or cross-sectional. Then your study setting, which is the name of your place or institute or city where your research is being conducted. Then the duration of study, the sample size, and for sample size you have to justify the calculations also. And you have to give the reference of study from where you pick up your values of prevalence. Then comes your sampling technique and sample selection criteria, which is inclusion or exclusion criteria. Then you describe your data collection procedures and you have to identify your variable of study, and then you tell the way of measuring these variables, your method of data collection, what type of method is, whether it is questionnaire or interview, and what kind of questions are included in your questionnaire, what language is used, whether it is structured or not. Then you detail your data analysis procedure and you have to tell what software are you going to use, what will be your variable type, and what statistics will be used for each kind of variables. After that, you will write ethical considerations. That is, any ethical issues that need to be taken care of, and you will be following them, like privacy, confidentiality of data, informed consent from the subjects, and no harm to study subjects. Then you give references of all the studies that have been mentioned in your introduction, and you write these references in Vancouver style. At the end of synopsis, you give your annexure, including your questionnaire. I will now discuss operational definition in detail. It is the definition of exposure and outcome variables of interest in context to objectives in a particular study and their means of measurement. For example, my study is on awareness. Level of awareness will be defined by what questions I'm going to use for awareness and what are the categories of level and how I will declare a person to have a certain level of awareness. Next variable is prevalence of anemia for another study. So here anemia has a standard definition and so does prevalence has. So here I do not need to give an operational definition, and another example is demographic characteristics, clinical spectrum. Demographic characteristics include many variables, and here I need to define what characteristics I will be including in studying the demography of patients or subjects. And clinical spectrum of any disease, I will operationalize this because again there may be many kind of variables that can be included to measure this variable. Another variable is effectiveness of drug. It's a very commonly used variable, and here again I need to define how I will be measuring the drug effectiveness, what outcomes I will be recording in patients, and is it the reduction in complication, improvement in quality of life or health. Suppose we are going to study misconception about polio vaccine. Our objectives can be to determine the frequency of misconceptions about polio vaccine in people living in Rawalpindi. Our variable is frequency of misconceptions. This is a quantitative variable and I will have to define this variable. Another objective for measuring misconceptions can be to identify the frequency of different types of misconceptions about polio vaccine in people living in Rawalpindi. This is again a quantitative variable, and variables here are frequency of misconceptions in first objective and frequency of different types of misconceptions in second objective. So I will define frequency of misconception as when a person declares polio vaccine as of no benefit or a source of harm to person of any form, and frequency will be measured by asking people what they think about vaccine. If they say yes, it's of no use or it's harmful, they will be counted among those who have a misconception. Second objective was on the variable frequency of different misconceptions. Here I will give a list of different misconceptions like vaccine is unnecessary, it's haram, it's a conspiracy, it's of government or of non-Muslims, or it's harmful. So I will give a list of different variables to be studied under this main study variable, and I'll define each of these variables. Now I will discuss the method of article writing. The components that are included in article or original research are abstract, introduction, materials and methods, results, discussion, conclusion, and references. Additional components can be acknowledgements, conflicts of interest, and recommendations also. Your first page is your title page. Here you write your complete title of the study, and then you give the author's name and their author number and their qualification, their department or institute. Then for one author you have to give the address and the contact details. That author will be the corresponding author who will be submitting the article and who will be sent article back by the journals for corrections, and they will be responsible for future correspondence. Then you write your abstract. In abstract, you give a summary of your article. Summary can be of 250 words. On average, 1 to 3 lines you give for all the necessary components of your article. And these include your background, your objective, your methods, results, and conclusion. At the end, you write some 4 to 5 keywords. Then you write your introduction that can be the same as it was in synopsis. Materials and methods will be the same as in synopsis, but in synopsis you write this study will be done in this institute. Now, as you have done the study, you will write everything in past tense and in the form of paragraph and not headings. Then you write your results. You can give your charts, tables, and write results that are important in text also. For other results, you just refer the reader to the table number. In discussion, you discuss your results that are the most prominent ones, and you compare your results with other studies. It is as long as introduction usually, and both introduction and discussion I will be discussing later on how to write each of these two components. Then you write your conclusion, which is a single paragraph usually, and it's a statement of what the researcher has concluded out of the findings. And you do not need to mention any figures here. You simply write whether my hypothesis was true or false, whether the magnitude of problem was high, prevalence of anemia was high or low, etc. Then you give acknowledgements. You can acknowledge anyone, any researcher, any senior, any student, or any person who gave you help or guidance or gave you funding. Then you write your conflicts of interest. It basically it's a statement which declares whether you had any conflicts of interest or not. By conflict of interest, we mean that were you already biased in your research because of some personal or business or financial interest in the topic of study? Or will you have any benefit if your study hypothesis comes true or false? Or if your magnitude of problem you are studying, if it comes high or low, will you have any benefit? May it be personal or financial, etc. If you have any interest, you have to mention that. Otherwise, you simply state that there were no conflicts of interest declared by all the authors of study. Then you write references of all the studies that were mentioned in your introduction and discussion. And these studies should not be more than 10 years old, and majority or usually 20%, at least 20% studies should be from last 5 years published articles. References should be given a number in order in which they appear in text, and we use Vancouver style